Hey friends! Tonight, we're leaving behind the romanticized Egypt of glossy museum postcards and stepping into the echoing corridors of real royal life. Not the kind of life you'd want. Imagine waking in a room the size of a small temple, its walls carved with the names of gods you're expected to embody. The air is cold despite the desert heat outside, smelling faintly of stone dust and yesterday's incense. Before you've had a sip of water, the first servant arrives, not to ask how you slept, but to begin the ritual of dressing you in gold heavy enough to leave marks on your skin. From that moment, your day belongs to the gods, the court, and the people, in that order. Every step you take is rehearsed, every glance measured, every word recorded by a scribe whose ink will outlast your body. You are the living embodiment of divine power and a prisoner of it. There's no such thing as privacy. Priests chant at you until your legs ache. You eat surrounded by tasters who make sure you live long enough to sign tomorrow's grain decrees. Even pleasure is political. The concubines who share your bed are gifts from other powerful families, and their loyalty is not necessarily to you. At night, the palace quiets, but you can still hear the wind sweeping over the sand. Somewhere in the necropolis, jackals prowl among the tombs. One of those tombs will be yours. And when it's sealed, the man will be gone, but the crown will endure, waiting for the next god to wear it. So tonight, we'll walk through a day and a lifetime in the sandals of a pharaoh. Not the gold, not the glory, just the truth. Waking in the palace of stone. The sound of a gentle desert wind, the distant, soft lapping of water, the faint echo in a large stone room. Narrator. Dawn in the land of Kemet, the Black Land, does not arrive with a gentle stirring. It arrives as a command. The sun god, Ra, begins his daily journey across the sky, and so his living incarnation on earth must also begin. For the pharaoh, waking is not a private, personal act. It is a state ceremony, the first of 1,000 rituals in a day that does not belong to the person, but to the office. The royal chamber is not a cozy, warm, and comfortable space. It is a cavern of cool, polished stone. The ceilings are high, lost in shadow, painted with stars to mimic the night sky. The walls are thick, built of limestone or granite, and they hold the deep cellar cool of the desert night long after the sun has risen. They are not bare, but are covered in a universe of painted and carved images. The gods are here, their animal heads and human bodies watching with an eternal, unblinking gaze. The hieroglyphs are here, telling the stories of creation, of battles, of the endless cycle of death and rebirth. To wake in this room is to wake in a temple. It is to be reminded, with your first conscious breath, that you are not merely a human being. You are Horus on earth, the son of Ra, the living link between the world of mortals and the world of the gods. Every breath you take feels as if it belongs not to you, but to history. The bed itself is a work of art, a piece of state furniture. It might be of gilded wood, its legs carved in the shape of lion's paws. The mattress is of fine woven linen, stuffed with soft reeds or feathers, but it offers little comfort against the immense, silent, and watchful presence of the room. The air itself feels heavy, freighted with the weight of 3,000 years of tradition. The first sounds are not the sounds of a waking family. They are the soft, shuffling footsteps of the high priests of the morning ritual, waiting in the antechamber. They are the distant, chanted hymns from the nearby temple, a sound that has been welcoming the sun since the dawn of time. There is no moment of quiet reflection, no chance to lie and gather one's thoughts. The moment the pharaoh's eyes are open, the day's great, intricate, and exhausting performance has begun. Servants, moving with a silent, ritualized grace, enter the chamber. They do not speak to the person, they attend to the vessel of the god. They bring a basin of cool water from the Nile, water that has been purified and blessed. The morning ablutions are not about personal cleanliness. They are a ritual purification, a washing away of the profane darkness of the night to prepare the divine body for the sacred duties of the day. The pharaoh is a silent, passive participant in this morning's drama. The body is an object, a sacred icon to be washed, anointed, and dressed by the hands of others. There is no spontaneity, no choice. Every action is dictated by a tradition that is ancient, sacred, and utterly inflexible. To wake as a pharaoh is to wake into a state of profound and inescapable loneliness. You are surrounded by people, but you are not among them. They are your servants, your priests, your subjects. You are their God. The space between you is as vast and as unbridgeable as the space between the earth and the sun. The cold that lives in the stone of the chamber is a mirror of the cold that surrounds the throne.
Dressing for the gods, not yourself. After the ritual purification of the morning, the second great ceremony of the pharaoh's day begins, the dressing. This is not the simple, private act of choosing one's clothes. It is a sacred investiture, a daily coronation. Every garment, every jewel, every layer is imbued with a deep symbolic meaning. The pharaoh's clothing is not designed for comfort. It is designed to be a message, a declaration of divine power, and it is often a heavy and an uncomfortable burden. The process is managed by a team of high-ranking attendants, the masters of the royal wardrobe. They bring forth the garments from great carved chests of cedar wood. The first layer, against the skin, is the only one that speaks of comfort. It is a simple, pleated kilt, or shendit, made of the finest, almost translucent royal linen. Egyptian linen is a marvel of the ancient world, woven with a skill that is almost impossible to replicate. It is light, it is airy, and it is a relief against the heat of the day to come.
First comes the wesech, the broad collar. This is a magnificent and a heavy object. It is a wide, semicircular collar that covers the shoulders and the upper chest. It is made of hundreds of beads of gold, of lapis lazuli, of carnelian, and of turquoise, all sewn onto a papyrus backing. To wear it is to carry the mineral wealth of the earth on your shoulders. It is beautiful, but it is also heavy, and its edges can chafe and dig into the skin. Bracelets of gold and precious stones are placed on the wrists and the upper arms. Anklets are fastened. The fingers are adorned with heavy golden rings bearing the scarab beetle, a symbol of rebirth, or the cartouche, the oval that contains the pharaoh's sacred name. And then comes the crown. There are many crowns, each for a different occasion. There is the white crown of Upper Egypt, the tall conical crown known as the hedjet. There is the red crown of Lower Egypt, the deshret, with its distinctive flat top and its curling wire. And there is the double crown, the shent, which combines the two, a powerful symbol of the unified kingdom. These crowns are not light. They are made of a framework of leather or reeds, covered in fabric or precious metals, and they are often cumbersome and hot. The pharaoh holds the symbols of office, the crook, the heka,
a symbol of the king as the shepherd of his people, and the flail, the nekaka, a symbol of the fertility of the land and of the pharaoh's authority. The final touch is the makeup. The eyes are heavily lined with black coal. This is not just for beauty. The coal is believed to have magical protective properties to ward off the evil eye and the harsh glare of the sun. The eyelids are sometimes colored with a green pigment made from malachite. The pharaoh is now dressed. The human being has disappeared beneath a glittering, heavy, and deeply uncomfortable shell of gold, of jewels, and of divine symbolism. The clothing is a form of armor, but it is an armor that does not protect the body from a sword, but that protects the concept of kingship from the fragile, fallible humanity of the person who holds the office. Every stitch, every bead, every ounce of gold is a stitch in the fabric of power and a bar in the gilded cage of a god.
The morning ritual that never ends. Once the divine body of the pharaoh has been dressed, the day's most important and most demanding work begins. This is not the work of governing, of judging, or of leading armies. It is the work of ritual. The pharaoh's primary function is to act as the chief priest of all the gods of Egypt and to perform the daily ceremonies that maintain Ma'at, the divine order, the harmony, the justice of the universe. The pharaoh proceeds from the private chambers of the palace to the temple. This might be a small private temple within the palace complex, or the great state temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak. The journey is a silent, solemn procession. Inside the temple, the air is cool and dark. The only light comes from the flickering oil lamps, reflecting off the colossal stone columns and the painted walls. The air is thick and heavy with the scent of incense, a sweet, resinous, and almost suffocating perfume. The pharaoh is led by the high priests to the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. This is a small, dark chamber where the cult statue of the god resides. A small, portable statue of gold and precious stone housed within a sacred shrine. No one but the pharaoh and the highest-ranking priests are ever allowed to enter this sacred space.
And here, the morning ritual unfolds. It is a long, complex, and unvarying ceremony that is repeated without fail every single day. The ritual is a reenactment of the creation of the world, a daily affirmation of the victory of order over chaos. The pharaoh stands before the shrine. The priests begin their chanting, their voices a low, hypnotic drone, reciting the ancient sacred texts from papyrus scrolls. The pharaoh's role is that of a living statue. He must stand perfectly still, his posture erect, his gaze fixed for hours on end. He is not a participant in the ritual. He is the central object of it. He is the conduit, the channel through which the power flows from the human world to the divine. The ritual has many stages. The shrine is opened. The god statue is awakened with a prayer. The pharaoh then performs a symbolic purification of the statue, sprinkling it with blessed water. He then dresses the statue, adorning it with fine linen and jewels, a divine echo of his own morning dressing ceremony. He feeds the god, presenting it with a feast of the finest food and drink: bread, meat, wine, beer. These are not consumed, but are offered, their essence absorbed by the deity.
Throughout this long and slow-moving ceremony, the pharaoh must maintain a state of perfect, serene, and divine composure. His legs ache. His mind wanders. The heavy collar on his shoulders digs into his skin. The thick incense makes his head swim. but he cannot show any sign of human weakness, of boredom, of fatigue. He is being watched, not just by the priests, but by the gods themselves. This ritual is the most important work of the empire. It is believed that if this ceremony is not performed, and performed perfectly every day, the sun will not rise, the Nile will not flood, and the world will descend into chaos. The weight of the entire cosmos rests upon the pharaoh's ability to stand still, to be the perfect, silent, and unwavering vessel of the divine. The hours pass, the chants drone on, the incense smoke curls in the still, dark air. This is the reality of being a god-king. It is not a life of action, but of a profound and a deeply and an endlessly exhausting stillness.
The banquet without taste. The pharaoh returns to the palace. It is time for the royal meal. In a land that is often on the brink of famine, the banquet of the pharaoh is a spectacle of unimaginable abundance, a testament to the wealth and the fertility of the kingdom. But for the pharaoh, the act of eating is not a moment of pleasure or of relaxation. It is another ritual, another performance, and it is shrouded in a constant and a deadly fear. The pharaoh dines not in a simple room, but in a great colonnaded hall. He does not sit on a chair, but on a low, gilded throne. The food is served on tables of alabaster, in dishes of gold and silver. The meal is a parade of the finest foods that Egypt has to offer. There are whole roasted geese and ducks, their skin crisp and golden. There is fresh fish from the Nile, grilled with herbs. There are great joints of beef and of gazelle. There are side dishes of lentils, of chickpeas, of fava beans, all cooked in rich, savory sauces. There are pyramids of fruit, fresh figs, dates, pomegranates, and sweet, juicy melons. There are delicate honey cakes and breads made from the finest, whitest wheat flour.
The wine, a deep, rich red from the vineyards of the delta, is served in golden goblets. But the pharaoh cannot simply reach out and eat. Every single dish, every single drop of wine must first pass a terrifying and a necessary test. Before a plate is placed before the pharaoh, it is presented to the royal food taster. This is a high-ranking and a trusted official whose job is to take a small bite of every single dish. He then waits. He waits for a sign of a sudden illness, of the violent convulsions of a fast-acting poison. Poison is the silent and the favored weapon of the court. It is the tool of the jealous brother, the ambitious courtier, the rival queen. The pharaoh knows that a single unguarded mouthful could be his last. The history of his own dynasty is likely filled with stories of predecessors who died a sudden and a convenient death after a meal.
And so the pharaoh must watch as another man eats his food first. He must wait in a tense and a silent moment to see if his servant will live or die. Only when the taster has shown no ill effects is the dish deemed safe and placed before the king. This ritual, which is essential for survival, strips the act of eating of all its simple human pleasure. The food, by the time it reaches the pharaoh, is no longer an object of desire, but an object of suspicion. Every bite is taken with a small and a deeply ingrained sense of fear. And the meal is not eaten in private. The pharaoh is often on display, even when he eats. The high-ranking members of the court are present,
their eyes watching his every move. The act of eating is another performance of divine and of serene composure. The richest food in all of Egypt is laid before him, but it has no taste. It tastes of the ceremony that surrounds it. It tastes of the fear of the taster. It tastes of the constant, quiet, and chilling whisper of betrayal. In the midst of all this abundance, the Pharaoh eats alone, his feast a banquet of pure, and of a cold, and of a gilded suspicion.
The throne that feels like a prison. The throne of the Pharaoh is one of the most powerful symbols in the ancient world. It is the physical center of the kingdom, the seat of absolute power, the place where the will of a god is made manifest on earth. It is a thing of breathtaking beauty, crafted from the most precious materials, of cedar wood from Lebanon, of ebony from Africa, of ivory, and of sheets of pure, and of a heavy, and of an unyielding gold. Let us imagine the Pharaoh, his morning rituals complete, taking his seat on the throne for the day's formal audience. He sits in the great audience hall of the palace, a vast columned space designed to inspire awe and to intimidate all who enter. He is not lounging. He is sitting in a state of perfect and of a rigid and of an utterly still composure. His back is straight. His hands rest on the arms of the throne. His gaze is fixed on the distant entrance of the hall. He is no longer a man. He is a living statue, an icon, a symbol of the eternal and unchanging power of the Egyptian state.
And he is on display. A long line of people waits to approach him. There are the high officials of his court, the vizier, the treasurer, the high priest of Amun-Ra, who come to report on the business of the empire. There are foreign envoys from the land of the Hittites or from the islands of the Aegean who come to offer tribute and to negotiate treaties. There are petitioners, ordinary people who have, through some extraordinary process, been granted a moment to bring their grievances before the living God. Each person who approaches the throne performs a deep and a ritualized and an abject prostration, their forehead touching the polished stone floor. They do not dare to look directly into the Pharaoh's eyes. They speak not to the man, but to the institution. And the Pharaoh must listen. He must listen for hours on end, his face an impassive mask, showing no sign of boredom, of fatigue, of any human emotion. He must listen to the dry reports of the grain harvest, to the flattering and often false words of a foreign diplomat, to the rambling and often pathetic plea of a peasant whose land has been stolen.
He cannot shift his weight. He cannot scratch an itch. He cannot sigh with weariness. He is a god, and a god is perfect, and a god is still. The throne itself, for all its beauty, is a hard and unforgiving seat. The gold is cold to the touch. The intricate carvings dig into his back. To sit upon it for hours is a feat of pure and of painful physical endurance. And from this gilded and this elevated and this isolated position, the world is a distant and a formal spectacle. The Pharaoh sees the bowing heads, he hears the murmured words, but he is separated from it all by a vast and an invisible chasm of divinity. He cannot simply get up and walk away. He cannot decide that the audience is over. He is bound to the throne by the same inexorable weight of ritual that governs every other moment of his day. The throne that gleams in the torchlight, the throne that is the ultimate symbol of his power, is also the ultimate symbol of his confinement. It is the place where his humanity is most completely and most publicly erased.
Crossing the courtyard of shadows. A hot desert wind. For the pharaoh, even the simple act of walking from one part of the palace to another is not a private or a casual affair. It is a formal and a highly choreographed and a deeply symbolic procession. To move through the palace is to move through a landscape of power, of ritual, and of constant, silent observation. Freedom of movement, the simple ability to wander where one's own will desires, is a concept that does not belong in this world. Let us imagine the pharaoh needs to move from the audience hall to the private royal apartments. This is not a journey of a few simple steps. It is a procession. The word is given, and the palace machinery clicks into motion. The great corridors and the open, sun-drenched courtyards are cleared. Ordinary servants and low-ranking officials melt away, disappearing into side passages and alcoves. It is forbidden for a person of lower rank to casually gaze upon the divine person of the pharaoh. Then the procession forms. The pharaoh does not walk alone. He is flanked by his personal bodyguards, tall, imposing Nubian or Libyan mercenaries, their polished spear tips glinting in the sun. They are a silent and a deadly and a constantly present wall of muscle and of bronze. He is preceded by high-ranking officials who walk backwards, their faces always towards him, their bodies bent in a posture of permanent reverence. They might swing censers, the sweet, heavy smoke of the incense creating a sacred, perfumed atmosphere around the pharaoh's person.
He might be shaded from the sun by a large, feathered fan held aloft by a servant. The pharaoh himself walks with a slow and a measured and a deeply unnatural grace. Every step is a performance. He is not just a man walking. He is the living God, processing through his sacred domain. His gaze is fixed forward, his expression serene and impassive. He walks through the great courtyards of the palace. These are vast, open spaces designed to impress. The scale is monumental. The columns are so large that a dozen men cannot encircle them. The walls are covered in painted reliefs depicting the pharaoh's great victories, his triumphs over the chaotic forces of the world. He is walking through the story of his own divinely ordained power. The sunlight is bright, the shadows are sharp and dark. The contrast is a perfect metaphor for his own existence, a life lived in the brilliant and the unforgiving glare of public duty, and a private inner world that is full of shadow. The silence of these cleared spaces is profound. The normal, bustling life of the palace has been brought to a complete and a respectful and a fearful halt. The only sounds are the soft, shuffling footsteps of the procession on the stone floors, the distant, ever-present sigh of the desert wind, and the sound of the pharaoh's own slow and measured breathing. This is the reality of the pharaoh's freedom. He is the master of the greatest empire on earth, and yet he cannot walk 10 paces in his own home without it becoming a state ceremony. He is the most powerful man in the world, and he is also the most confined. The vast, beautiful, and silent courtyards of his palace are not a space of freedom. They are the elegant and the sun-baked and the deeply lonely corridors of his own gilded prison.
Reading the grain reports. In the quiet of the royal study, away from the grand ceremonies of the temple and the audience hall, the pharaoh must attend to the practical, and often deeply anxious, business of ruling. And in the agricultural kingdom of Egypt, one issue overshadows all others. It is the lifeblood of the empire, the source of all wealth, and the ultimate measure of the pharaoh's success. This is the Nile and its annual flood. The pharaoh sits before a scribe. The room is simple, functional. Papyrus scrolls are stacked neatly in wooden chests. The scribe is unrolling one of these scrolls. It is a report sent by a provincial governor from a district far upriver in the south. The scribe begins to read in a low and a monotonous and a clear voice. The report is a collection of numbers. It is a record of the height of the Nile inundation for that year, measured on the great stone nilometers that are built along the river's banks. For the pharaoh, these numbers are the most important text in the world. They are a prophecy of the year to come. The entire Egyptian civilization is a gift of the Nile. The annual summer flood deposits a rich new layer of fertile black silt upon the fields, allowing for a bounty of crops to be grown in the midst of the desert. But the Nile is a capricious god. Its flood is not always perfect.
If the scribe reads a number that is too low, a cold and a quiet, fear grips the pharaoh's heart. A low flood means that the waters will not reach the higher fields. It means that a significant portion of the land will not be able to be cultivated. It means a poor harvest. It means hunger. And it means unrest among the people. If the scribe reads a number that is too high, the fear is just as great. A flood that is too powerful can be a destructive, raging torrent. It can wash away the dikes, the villages, the people themselves. It can take years for the land to recover. The perfect flood is a delicate and a rare and a beautiful thing. It is a gentle and a predictable and a life-giving inundation. The pharaoh is considered to be a god on earth, and one of his primary divine functions is to ensure the proper working of the natural world, to maintain Ma'at, the divine order. And the most visible sign of this order is the annual flood. A good flood is a sign of the pharaoh's favor with the gods. It is a proof of his divine power.
But a bad flood, whether too high or too low, is a sign of his failure. It is a sign that he has lost the favor of the gods, that the divine order is breaking down. It is a direct threat to his legitimacy, to his very right to rule. And so the pharaoh listens to the dry and the dusty and the numerical reports from the provinces. And he is listening to the heartbeat of his kingdom. He is listening to a story that is told in cubits and in palms, a story of the river's mood. He is the most powerful man in the world. He can command armies. He can build temples that will last for eternity. But he cannot command the rain to fall in the distant Ethiopian highlands where the Nile is born. He is a god, and yet he is utterly powerless in the face of the one force that truly rules his land. The cracks in the papyrus scroll feel like cracks in the very foundation of his own divine authority.
Pleas of the people you'll never meet. The pharaoh is the supreme judge of all of Egypt. He is the source of all law, the final court of appeal. In theory, any subject, no matter how humble, has the right to bring their case, their grievance, their plea directly to the feet of the living God. But the reality is a far more distant and a far more impersonal process. The Pharaoh does not rule over people, he rules over a vast and a complex bureaucracy, and the cries of his subjects reach him only as a faint and a filtered and a very quiet echo. Let us return to the royal study. After the grain reports have been read, the vizier, the Pharaoh's chief minister, presents another set of documents. These are the petitions, the legal cases that have been deemed important enough to require a royal judgment. The cases have already made a long journey to reach this chamber. They began in a local village court, presided over by the town elders. They may then have been passed up to the court of the provincial governor, and now they have arrived here, at the apex of the legal pyramid.
The scribe unrolls a new scroll. He begins to read, his voice the same flat and unemotional tone he used for the grain reports. The story he reads is a small and a human and a deeply personal tragedy. It is the plea of a farmer whose land has been illegally seized by a powerful and a corrupt local official. The farmer has lost his livelihood. His family is starving. He is begging the great god, his Pharaoh, for justice. The Pharaoh listens. He does not see the farmer's face, creased with worry and with sun. He does not hear the desperation in the man's voice. He does not see the tears of his family. He sees only the neat, black, and hieratic script on the pale surface of the papyrus. He hears only the calm and dispassionate voice of his scribe. The thousands of individual and suffering human beings who make up his kingdom are reduced to this, to ink, to formulaic phrases, to a case number. The Pharaoh must now make a judgment. He listens to the summary of the evidence as presented by his vizier. He might ask a few pointed questions, and then he gives his verdict.
His decision is not based on a deep and a personal engagement with the case. It is based on a larger and a more abstract principle, the principle of Ma'at, of divine order and of justice. The corrupt official has disrupted the proper order of things. He must be punished. The land must be restored to the farmer. The Pharaoh speaks a few quiet words. The scribe, with his reed pen, records the royal decree. A new scroll is created. It will be sealed with the Pharaoh's own seal, and it will begin its long journey back down the bureaucratic chain, eventually reaching the small, distant village. And if the system works, the farmer will get his land back. The Pharaoh has, in this moment, dispensed justice. He has restored the divine order, but he has done so from a position of immense and an almost inhuman distance. He will never know the name of the farmer whose life he has just saved. He will never feel the man's gratitude. The human reality of his kingdom is a world that he can touch only through the dry and the dusty and the second-hand medium of the scroll. He is the father of his people, but he is a father who will never meet his children. He is a shepherd who will never know the faces of his flock. And this great and this profound and this necessary distance is one of the heaviest burdens of the divine crown.
The Sandstorm Audience. The power of the Pharaoh is, in theory, absolute. He is the master of the natural world, the one who ensures the sun rises and the river floods. But sometimes the natural world chooses to disagree. Sometimes the raw, untamable power of the desert itself will rise up and remind the God King of his own fragile human limitations.
Let us imagine a formal audience is being held in an open-air pavilion in the palace complex. The pharaoh is meeting with a delegation of envoys from a foreign land, perhaps the bearded and the richly robed emissaries of the Babylonian king. The air is hot. The sun is a white and a blinding disk in the sky. The audience is a slow and a formal and a deeply ritualized affair. Translators are at work, turning the flowery diplomatic language of Akkadian into the sacred language of Egypt. Gifts are being presented. The envoys are making their requests. And then, on the horizon, a change is seen. A low and a dark and a yellow-brown cloud is building. It is a sandstorm, a kamsim, the great, hot, and destructive wind of the desert. The courtiers and the priests begin to murmur nervously. The logical human response is to retreat, to seek the shelter of the enclosed stone halls of the palace. But the audience cannot be so easily dismissed. To do so would be a sign of weakness, a loss of face before these important foreign guests.
The pharaoh must remain. He is the living God, the master of the elements. He cannot be seen to be afraid of a mere wind. And so the audience continues as the storm bears down upon them. The wind arrives first, a hot and a powerful and a gusty blast that whips at the fine linen robes of the courtiers and sends the silk banners of the pavilion snapping. And then comes the sand. It is not just a few grains of dust. It is a solid and a roiling and a suffocating wall of yellow grit. It descends upon the pavilion, and the world is transformed into a maelstrom of howling wind and of stinging, abrasive sand. The sun is blotted out. The visibility drops to a few feet. The air becomes a thick and a choking and a gritty soup. The pharaoh must continue to pretend that nothing is happening. He must sit, serene and impassive, on his gilded throne, while the desert itself is trying to tear the world apart around him.
The fine sand gets into everything. It stings his eyes. It gets into his mouth, coating his teeth with a layer of grit. It finds its way through the fine weave of his linen robes and onto his skin. The foreign envoys are huddled, their faces wrapped in their own robes, their composure gone. The servants are struggling to hold down the flapping awnings of the pavilion. But the pharaoh cannot flinch. He cannot cough. He cannot shield his eyes. He must sit, a still and a perfect and an unmoving point of divine order in the heart of the raging chaos. His performance is a defiance of reality. It is a statement that the power of the pharaoh is greater than the power of the storm. But it is a lie, and he knows it. He knows that he is just a man with sand in his eyes and fear in his heart. The sandstorm is a powerful and a humbling and a deeply uncomfortable reminder that for all his titles and for all his gold and for all his divine authority, he is still just a small and a fragile and a human thing in the face of the immense and the indifferent and the unconquerable power of the desert.
The courtier's web. The greatest dangers to a pharaoh do not always come from the invading armies on the frontiers or from the anger of the gods. More often, the most immediate and the most lethal threat is much closer to home. It is in the quiet and the perfumed and the smiling faces of the men who surround him every day. This is the world of the royal court, a beautiful and an elegant and a deeply treacherous web of ambition, of flattery, and of intrigue.
The pharaoh is the sun at the center of this small political universe, and all the other bodies, the courtiers, revolve around him, their orbits dictated by his favor, by his moods, by his perceived weaknesses. Let us watch the pharaoh as he holds his morning court. He is surrounded by the highest officials of the land, the vizier, the chief minister, the high priest of Amun-Ra, a man whose power sometimes rivals the pharaoh's own, the generals of the army, their faces hard from the sun of distant campaigns, the scribes, the treasurers, the keepers of the royal seal. Every man in this room is a petitioner. They have come to ask for something, a promotion, a grant of land, a favorable judgment in a dispute. And they are all rivals. They are all in a constant and a subtle and a deeply serious competition for the pharaoh's attention and for his favor.
The language they use is a masterpiece of indirection and of flattery. They address the pharaoh with a string of high-flown titles. They praise his wisdom, his strength, his divine radiance. Their words are as smooth and as sweet and as sticky as honey. But beneath this surface of abject deference, a ruthless game is being played. Every smile is a calculation. Every glance is a message. The pharaoh must learn to read this silent language, to see the ambition that lies behind the flattering words, to sense the threat that is hidden in a seemingly innocent request. He lives in a world where he can trust no one completely. The general who pledges his undying loyalty today could be the man who was plotting a military coup tomorrow. The high priest who speaks of the will of the gods could be manipulating that will for his own political ends. Even the members of his own family, his brothers, his uncles, his sons, are potential rivals, potential threats to his throne. The court is a place of factions, of alliances that are made and are broken in a day. The pharaoh must constantly balance these factions against each other, playing one off against the other, ensuring that no single man or group becomes too powerful. It is a constant and an exhausting and a deeply stressful game of political chess.
He is surrounded by whispers. A courtier will come to him in private to whisper a piece of gossip, a rumor, an accusation against a rival. Is the information true? Is it a genuine warning? Or is it a lie, a poison whispered in his ear, designed to destroy an enemy? The pharaoh must be the ultimate judge of character, and a single mistake in that judgment can be fatal. And so he learns to build a wall around himself. He learns to listen without revealing his own thoughts. He learns to nod, to smile, to make a non-committal promise, while his mind is a cold and a calculating and a deeply suspicious machine. The silk-tongued men who bow before him are his court, his government, his companions, and they are also his potential assassins. He is the most powerful man among them, and he is also the most isolated and the most alone.
The Feast of 100 Eyes. The setting of the sun does not bring an end to the pharaoh's public duties. The night is a time for a different kind of performance, a different kind of ritual. This is the time of the royal feast. But for the pharaoh, this is not a time of relaxation or of convivial pleasure. It is a formal and a stilted and a deeply lonely public ceremony, a celebration at which he is the guest of honor and also the main exhibit. Let us enter the great banqueting hall of the palace. The room is vast. its high ceilings lost in shadow. It is lit by 100 flickering oil lamps, their light reflecting off the gilded columns and the polished stone floor. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat, of exotic spices, of wine, and of the lotus flowers that decorate the tables. Musicians sit in a corner, playing a soft and hypnotic and an endless melody on the harp and the flute. Young and almost naked dancing girls, their bodies lithe and oiled, move with a slow and a sinuous and a practiced grace. The guests are the highest elite of the kingdom, the great officials, the priests, the generals, and their wives, all dressed in their finest pleated linen gowns, their bodies adorned with jewels and with heavy, intricate wigs. And at the head of the hall, on a raised and separate and solitary platform, sits the Pharaoh. He is a statue at his own celebration.
The food is brought before him in a grand procession, an endless parade of culinary artistry. But as we have seen, he cannot simply eat. Every dish must be tasted, every cup must be sipped by his retinue of tasters. He eats with a slow and a formal and a deeply detached grace, his every movement watched by the 100 pairs of eyes in the hall. He is the center of all attention, and yet he is entirely separate from the celebration. The guests at the lower tables laugh, and they talk, and they drink, but they do not speak to him unless he speaks to them first. Their conversation is a low and a respectful and a distant murmur. He is a lonely island of divinity in a sea of humanity. The entertainment is for him, but it is not with him. The musicians play towards him. The dancers direct their graceful movements for his eyes. But he cannot applaud. He cannot show any sign of overt pleasure. He must remain serene and impassive and godlike. The wine flows freely for the guests, but he must drink with a careful and a measured moderation. To be seen to be drunk is to be seen to be human, to be fallible. It is a weakness that he cannot afford to show. The hours of the feast stretch on, a long and a slow and a deeply repetitive performance. The music, the food, the wine, the dancers, it is all a beautiful and an elaborate and an utterly predictable piece of theater. The Pharaoh sits on his gilded chair, and he is a spectator of his own life. He sees the smiling faces, he hears the beautiful music, he tastes the rich food, but he cannot truly participate. He cannot have a genuine, unguarded conversation. He cannot laugh a real, spontaneous laugh. He is surrounded by all the pleasures the world has to offer, and yet he is perhaps the loneliest person in the room. The 100 eyes that watch him do not see a man. They see a symbol. They see a god. And in their adoring and their fearful and their calculating gaze, his own simple humanity is completely and irrevocably lost.
The concubines you cannot choose. In the private and the hidden and the deeply misunderstood world of the royal palace, there is another court, a court that is ruled not by men and by politics, but by women and by a different and a more subtle kind of power. This is the world of the royal harem, the private apartments. And for the Pharaoh, this world, which we might imagine to be a place of personal pleasure, is in fact another realm of duty, of politics, and of profound and of a complicated and of a deeply impersonal obligation.
The women of the harem are not simply a collection of beauties chosen for the pharaoh's pleasure. They are a complex and a hierarchical society, and each woman is there for a reason that often has nothing to do with desire. At the top of this pyramid is the great royal wife, the queen. She is often the pharaoh's own sister or half-sister, a marriage designed to keep the royal bloodline pure and to consolidate power within the family. She is a figure of immense religious and political importance, her role as the female counterpart to the male king, essential for the maintenance of cosmic order. Beneath her are the lesser wives. These are often the daughters of powerful Egyptian nobles, their marriages a way for the pharaoh to secure the loyalty of the great families of the kingdom.
And then there are the foreign wives and the concubines. These women are, in essence, political treaties, living, breathing symbols of an alliance. A pharaoh might have a wife who is a Hittite princess, a Mitannian princess, a Babylonian princess. These women arrive in Egypt in a grand procession with a huge dowry of gold, of slaves, of horses. Their marriage to the pharaoh is a way of sealing a peace treaty, of cementing a trade agreement. They are diplomatic gifts, and they are treated with the respect due to their rank. They are given their own households, their own servants. But they are also exiles. They have been sent, often at a very young age, to a foreign land whose language they do not speak, whose customs they do not understand. They will likely never see their own family, their own homeland again. Theirs is a life of gilded, and of a lonely, and of a profound homesickness. The concubines are of a lower rank still, but they too are often a part of this political web. They might be the daughters of a lesser vassal king sent as a tribute. The pharaoh's relationship with these hundreds of women is not a personal one. It is a matter of state. His visits to the harem are a part of his royal duty. His primary obligation is to produce a male heir to secure the succession of the dynasty. The birth of a son, especially from the great royal wife, is a matter of national celebration. But the harem is also a place of intense and of a quiet and of a deeply dangerous competition. Every woman in the private apartments is in a struggle for status, for influence, and for the ultimate prize, for her own son to be chosen as the next pharaoh. It is a world of whispers, of alliances, of rivalries. A smile can hide a dagger. A shared confidence can be a trap. The favor of the pharaoh is a fleeting and a powerful and a life-altering thing, and the women of the harem will use every tool at their disposal, their beauty, their intelligence, their cunning, to win it. For the pharaoh, this perfumed and this beautiful and this seemingly tranquil world is, in fact, one of the most dangerous places in the entire kingdom. It is a hotbed of intrigue, of jealousy, and of a quiet and a patient and a deeply personal ambition. The heart is never consulted.
The temple's endless demands. The pharaoh is the chief priest of Egypt. He is the living god, the intermediary between the mortal world and the divine. But his relationship with the other gods, and with their powerful and their wealthy and their deeply entrenched priesthoods, is a complex and a demanding and a constant negotiation. The gods of Egypt are hungry, and their hunger is a constant and a significant drain on the resources of the state. The great temples are not just places of worship, they are vast economic engines. The temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak, for example, is one of the largest landowners in all of Egypt. It owns vast tracts of the most fertile agricultural land, it controls its own fleets of ships on the Nile, it commands its own armies of laborers and of slaves. The high priest of Amun-Ra is a figure of immense and sometimes threatening political power. And the pharaoh, as the pious son of the gods, is expected to be the primary benefactor of these temples. A pharaoh's legitimacy, his claim to the throne, is measured in part by his generosity to the gods.
And so, a constant stream of the kingdom's wealth flows into the temple treasuries. A pharaoh will dedicate a significant portion of the spoils of a successful military campaign, the gold, the silver, the captured slaves, to the temple of the god who granted him the victory. He will grant the temples vast new estates of land, tax-free, in perpetuity. This is an act of piety, but it is also a slow and a dangerous erosion of the state's own economic base. And then there is the building. A great pharaoh is a great builder, and what he builds above all else are temples. He will add a new pylon, a great gateway to an existing temple. He will erect a new obelisk, a single massive shaft of granite, quarried far upriver and transported with an almost unimaginable effort. He will commission a new row of colossal statues of himself to stand guard before the temple entrance. This is a way of honoring the gods, but it is also a way of immortalizing himself, of leaving his own permanent mark on the sacred landscape of Egypt.
But this building requires a colossal expenditure of resources. It requires the quarrying and the transport of millions of tons of stone. It requires the labor of tens of thousands of workers, of skilled stonemasons, of artists, of painters, and of the vast and the anonymous army of laborers who drag the great stones into place. The demands of the gods, as interpreted by their priests, are endless. They require daily offerings of the finest food and drink. They require constant and expensive rituals. Their temples must be maintained, expanded, made ever more glorious. For the pharaoh, this is a difficult balancing act. He must be seen to be a pious and a generous patron of the gods, but he must also manage the economy of the state. He must feed his people. He must pay his army. He must maintain the secular infrastructure of the kingdom. The priests come to him, their faces solemn, their voices full of divine authority, and they tell him what the gods require. And the pharaoh, who is himself a god, must listen. He must give. He must build. The hunger of the gods and of their earthly servants is a powerful and a constant and a deeply political force that he can never fully ignore or control.
Walking among tombs you'll one day join. For an ordinary mortal, death is a distant and an often unacknowledged reality. But for the Egyptian pharaoh, death is not a future event. It is a present and a constant and a monumental life's work. From the moment he ascends the throne, one of his most important and most resource-intensive projects begins, the construction of his own tomb. The afterlife is not a vague and a spiritual concept for the pharaoh. It is a real and a physical and a detailed continuation of his life on earth. And it requires a house of eternity. Let us imagine the pharaoh in the middle of his reign making a journey across the Nile from his palace at Thebes to the West Bank, the land of the dead. He travels to the great and the silent and the sun-baked valley that is the royal necropolis, the place we call the Valley of the Kings. He is here to inspect the progress on his own future home. He enters the valley. It is a place of stark and of desolate and of sacred beauty. The cliffs of limestone rise up, their surfaces a pale and a golden color in the brilliant sun. The only sound is the whisper of the desert wind. He is led to the entrance of his tomb, a small and an unassuming doorway cut into the base of a cliff. The work has been going on for years, a slow and a patient and a secret labor, carried out by a special and a highly skilled and a sequestered community of workmen and of artists.
He steps out of the blinding light of the sun and into the cool and the dark and the silent world of his own tomb. He holds a flickering oil lamp, and he walks down a long and a sloping and a perfectly cut corridor that leads deep into the heart of the mountain. The air is cool, and it smells of chipped stone, of dust, and of the deep and the patient and the ancient stillness of the earth. The only sound is the soft and the shuffling of his own footsteps, and the distant and the rhythmic and the clicking sound of a sculptor's chisel. He walks through the half-finished chambers. The walls are covered in a fine and a smooth layer of plaster, and on this plaster the artists are at work. By the dim and the wavering light of their lamps, they are painting the story of his journey into the afterlife. He sees the images of the gods who will protect him. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. Osiris, the green-skinned king of the underworld. He sees the sacred texts from the Book of the Dead, the magical spells that will allow his soul to navigate the dangerous trials of the underworld and to achieve a blessed immortality.
He comes to the final and the great burial chamber. In the center of the room stands the massive and the granite sarcophagus that will one day hold his mummified body. Its surface is covered in intricate carvings. To stand here in the heart of your own half-finished tomb is a profound and a surreal and a deeply sobering experience. It is to be confronted in the most direct and the most tangible way possible with the reality of your own mortality. The Pharaoh is a living god, but he knows that this divinity is a temporary state. He too will die. And this great and this beautiful and this silent house of stone is the ultimate expression of that knowledge. His entire life on earth is in many ways simply a long and an elaborate and an expensive preparation for his eternal life in the world to come. He runs his hand over the cool, smooth stone of his own sarcophagus, and in the deep and the echoing and the perfect silence of his own tomb, he is perhaps more human than at any other time in his life.
The priest who speaks like a god. The Pharaoh is a god on earth. His word is law. His authority is, in theory, absolute. But in the complex and the deeply religious world of ancient Egypt, there is another power, a power that is older and more mysterious, and in some ways more profound than his own. This is the power of the priesthood, and the relationship between the divine king and the men who serve the other gods is a constant and a subtle and a deeply consequential dance of power. Let us imagine the Pharaoh in a meeting with the high priest of Amun-Ra from the great temple at Karnak. The high priest is a figure of immense prestige and of enormous wealth. He is not just a spiritual leader. He is the chief executive of a vast and a powerful and a semi-independent corporation. He comes before the Pharaoh and he performs the required prostrations. His language is one of abject humility, of a servant addressing his divine master. But this is a formality. Both men in the room understand the true nature of the power dynamic. The priest does not speak of his own desires, of his own political ambitions. He speaks only of the will of the god. He has come to report the outcome of a recent oracle. The priests have asked the statue of the god a question, and the god has answered, perhaps by causing the statue to nod or by some other secret and ritualized sign.
The god, the priest reports, desires a new pylon to be built at the temple. The god requires a new grant of land, 1,000 acres of the finest farmland to support his divine estate. The god has declared that a certain man should be appointed to a high position in the government. The priest is not making a request. He is delivering a divine command. And the Pharaoh must listen. To openly defy the expressed will of Amun-Ra, the most powerful god in the pantheon, is almost unthinkable. It would be an act of impiety that could undermine his own divine legitimacy. But the Pharaoh is not a fool. He knows that the line between the will of the god and the will of his high priest is a very thin and a very blurry one. He knows that the oracle can be a powerful tool of political manipulation. He knows that the priests are the leaders of a powerful and a wealthy and a deeply conservative faction in the court.
And so, a quiet and a subtle and a deeply coded negotiation begins. The Pharaoh will agree to the god's request for a new building. This is a public act of piety that will enhance his own prestige. But the grant of land, perhaps that can be negotiated. Perhaps a smaller and a less fertile tract of land will suffice. And the appointment of the priest's favored candidate, perhaps there is another and a more loyal man who would be even more pleasing to the god. This is a game of immense subtlety. The two most powerful men in Egypt are jousting, but their weapons are not swords. They are the words of piety, the language of divine will, the subtle arts of influence and of compromise. The Pharaoh is a god, but the priest is the one who speaks to the other gods. The priest is the one who interprets their signs, who understands their mysteries. And in this role, as the keeper of the sacred knowledge, lies a power that can check and can challenge and can sometimes even threaten the power of the throne itself. The Pharaoh must always be wary of the man who speaks with the voice of a god, for he can never be entirely sure whose words he is truly hearing.
The Nile's dark season. The life of Egypt is a rhythm of 3 seasons, all dictated by the moods of the river Nile. There is Akhet, the season of the inundation, when the life-giving floodwaters cover the land. There is Perit, the season of the emergence, when the waters recede and the planting begins. And then there is Shemu, the season of the harvest and of the low water. This is the season of heat, of dust, and of a deep and a collective and a national anxiety. For the Pharaoh, the season of Shemu is the time of his greatest test. The great granaries of the kingdom are full from the last harvest, but now the Nile is at its lowest. It is a slow and a sluggish and a green river. The fields that are not directly on its banks are dry, and they are cracked, and they are baked by the relentless sun into a hard and a barren and a lifeless clay. This is the season of waiting. The entire kingdom is waiting for the first signs of the next flood. They are waiting for the river to begin to rise again, to bring its gift of water and of silt. But sometimes the flood is late. Sometimes the signs are not good. The reports from the Nilometers in the south are discouraging. The river is not rising as it should. And as the weeks of waiting stretch into months, a new and a terrible and a familiar fear begins to spread throughout the land. It is the fear of famine. The Pharaoh is the guarantor of the cosmic order. He is the one who is supposed to ensure that the river floods, that the crops grow,
that the people are fed. A failure of the Nile is a direct and a public and a devastating failure of the Pharaoh himself. It is a sign that he has lost the favor of the gods, that Maat, the divine harmony, has been broken.
In his great, cool stone palace, the Pharaoh feels the heat of his people's fear. The petitions that reach him are no longer about stolen land. They are about empty bellies. The reports from his governors are filled with stories of unrest, of desperation. He must act. He is the father of his people, and his children are hungry. He orders the doors of the great state granaries to be opened. The grain that was collected as taxes during the years of plenty is now to be redistributed to the people. This is a massive and a complex and a deeply political undertaking. The scribes and the officials are put to work calculating the rations, organizing the transport of the grain. But this act of generosity is also an admission of weakness. It is a sign that the natural order has failed, and that the Pharaoh must resort to these artificial, administrative measures to keep his kingdom from collapsing. He will lead the great public rituals. He will make lavish offerings at the temples of the gods of the inundation. He will stand before his people, a serene and a confident and a divine figure, and he will reassure them that the gods have not abandoned them, that the flood will come. But in the quiet of his own chamber, in the deep of the night, he is just a man, watching the sky and waiting for a sign of rain in a distant land he has never seen. He is a god who cannot command the river, a king who is at the mercy of the weather. And in the dark season of the Nile, the golden crown upon his head feels as heavy and as brittle and as useless as the dry and the cracked and the barren earth of his own kingdom.
The scribe's silent judgment. In the world of the Pharaoh, power is expressed in monumental stone, in glittering gold, in vast armies. But there is another, quieter, and perhaps more enduring form of power in the Egyptian court. It is the power of the written word, and the man who wields this power is the scribe. The scribe is a figure of immense importance. He is a member of a small and an educated and a highly respected elite. In a society where the vast majority of the population is illiterate, the ability to read and to write the complex and the beautiful and the sacred hieroglyphic script is a form of magic. Let us imagine the Pharaoh in a meeting with his chief royal scribe. The scribe sits on the floor, his legs crossed. Across his lap is a wooden board. On it he has a sheet of fresh papyrus, a palette with cakes of black and of red ink, and his brushes made from fine reeds. The Pharaoh is dictating a letter to another great king, or a decree to be sent to the provinces, or the official account of a recent military victory. He speaks, and the scribe's hand moves with a swift and a practiced and a silent grace.
The scribe is the Pharaoh's memory. He is the keeper of the royal archives, the vast libraries of papyrus scrolls that contain the history of the kingdom, the records of the harvests, the tax rolls, the legal codes. The entire complex machinery of the state runs on the ink of his pen. But the scribe is more than just a secretary.
He is an observer. He is a witness. He sits in the most important meetings of the court. He hears the most secret of conversations. He sees the Pharaoh not just in his public, divine glory, but in his private moments of anger, of indecision, of weakness. He is the man who sees the human being behind the golden mask. And he writes it all down. The official inscriptions that will be carved onto the temple walls will tell a story of a perfect and an infallible and a divinely inspired king. They will speak only of great victories, of bountiful harvests, of a reign of perfect, unbroken harmony. But the scribe might also keep a private record, a more honest and a more human account of the events. Or he may simply be the one who crafts the official story, who knows which inconvenient facts to omit, which defeats to transform into strategic retreats, which moments of human frailty to erase from the permanent record.
The scribe's silent presence is a constant form of judgment. The Pharaoh knows that every word he speaks, every decision he makes, is being recorded. It is being written into a history that will outlive him by thousands of years. The chisel that carves his image onto the temple wall is a tool of immediate propaganda, but the reed pen of the scribe is a tool of a more subtle and a more permanent and a more powerful form of judgment. The Pharaoh is the master of the present. He can command armies, he can build cities, but the scribe is the master of the past and of the future. He is the one who will shape how the Pharaoh is remembered. He is the one who will write the story that will be read by the generations to come. And so, the relationship between the God-King and the man who writes his words is a complex one. It is a relationship of deep dependence, and of a quiet, and a subtle, and a deeply felt tension. For the Pharaoh knows that while his own life is fleeting, the ink of his scribe is, for all intents and purposes, eternal.
The murder in the palace. The palace of the Pharaoh is a fortress, a sacred space protected by high walls, by loyal guards, and by the divine aura of the king himself. But the history of ancient Egypt is a long and a bloody and a cautionary tale. And it tells us that the greatest threats to a pharaoh's life often come not from outside the palace walls, but from within them. The quiet, perfumed corridors of the royal residence are often the most dangerous place in the entire kingdom. The threat can come from many directions. It can come from a brother, or an uncle, or a son, a man who believes he has a stronger claim to the throne, or who is simply consumed by a raw and a naked and a ruthless ambition. The succession of the Pharaoh is not always a smooth and a peaceful and an orderly transition. It is often a moment of immense political instability, a moment when the daggers come out in the dark. The threat can also come from the harem, the private apartments of the royal women. A lesser wife whose son is not the designated heir might see an opportunity. If the current pharaoh were to die, and if the crown prince were to be removed, her own son could be placed on the throne. The harem, that world of quiet and of a smiling and of a silken rivalry, can become a hotbed of conspiracy.
We have records of such a plot from the reign of Ramesses III, a plot hatched by one of his lesser wives, T, to assassinate him and to place her son, Pentower, on the throne. The plot involved high-ranking officials of the court, military commanders, and the women of the harem. They used black magic. They made wax figures to curse the pharaoh and his guards. And they succeeded. The mummy of Ramesses III shows a deep and a fatal wound to his throat. The threat can also come from a powerful and a disaffected official, a vizier who feels he has been overlooked, a general who has grown too powerful and too popular with the army. And so the pharaoh must live his life in a state of constant and of a wearying and of a deeply paranoid vigilance. He trusts no one completely, not his brother, not his wife, not his closest advisor. His world is a world of precautions. His food is tasted, his drink is tested. His bedchamber is guarded day and night by his most loyal and usually foreign mercenaries, men who have no ties to the complex and the treacherous politics of the Egyptian court.
He sleeps behind a series of locked and of a barred and of a guarded doors. But these precautions are not always enough. A determined conspirator with access to the inner workings of the palace can always find a moment of weakness, a gap in the security. And so, the rumor of a murder in the palace is a recurring and a terrifying theme in the life of a pharaoh. He hears the stories of his ancestors, of the kings who were poisoned, or who were smothered in their sleep, or who were stabbed in a quiet corridor. And he knows that the same silent and invisible web of intrigue is being woven around him every day. He looks at the faces of the men and women who bow before him, and he must always wonder which one of them is his friend, and which one of them is simply waiting with a patient and a smiling and a deadly grace for the perfect moment to strike.
The Night of the Jackals. The Egyptian night is a world of deep and of a profound and of a star-filled beauty. The air is cool, the sky is a velvet black, and the great silent river of the Milky Way flows across it. For the pharaoh, the night can be a time of rare and of a solitary and of a quiet contemplation. Let us imagine him, late at night, standing on a high balcony of his palace. The great, bustling city of Thebes is asleep below. The only lights are the torches of the watchmen on the walls, and the distant and the eternal and the holy lights of the great temples. He looks across the dark and the silent and the slow-moving waters of the Nile. On the other side, on the west bank, lies a different kind of kingdom. It is the necropolis, the land of the dead. He can see the dark and the triangular shapes of the mortuary temples, and the dark and the ominous and the gaping mouths of the cliffs that hold the Valley of the Kings. This is the city of his ancestors. It is the city where his own eternal house is being built. It is a city that is, in many ways, more real and more permanent and more important than the living city of Thebes in which he now stands.
And from this silent and this sacred and this sleeping land, a sound comes drifting across the water on the night wind. It is a high and a yipping and a mournful cry. It is the sound of the jackals. The jackal is a creature of the desert, a scavenger, a haunter of the desolate places. But in the Egyptian mind, it is more than just an animal. The jackal is the physical manifestation of the god Anubis, the great god of embalming, the guardian of the tomb, the one who weighs the heart of the dead in the final judgment. To hear the cry of the jackals from the land of the dead is to hear the voice of the underworld itself. It is a reminder of the constant and the close and the intimate proximity of the world of the living and the world of the dead. The pharaoh stands on his balcony, the cool desert wind on his face, and he listens to this lonely and this haunting and this sacred music.
The cries are an omen. They are a message from the other world. They are a reminder of his own mortality, of the great journey that he too will one day have to take. They are a reminder of the final judgment, of the moment when his own heart will be weighed on the scales against the feather of truth. Has he ruled justly? Has he maintained ma'at? Has he been a good shepherd to his people? These are the questions that the yipping of the jackals seem to ask in their thin and their reedy and their otherworldly voices. The night of the jackals is a time of deep and of a personal and of a spiritual accounting. The divine king, the living God, is, in this moment, just a man, standing before the vast and the silent and the eternal mystery of death. He is the ruler of a great empire, but he knows that he too is a subject of a greater and an older and a more powerful kingdom, the kingdom of the dead. And its wild and its canine and its divine messengers are calling to him from across the water in the deep and the quiet and the star-filled Egyptian night.
The moment you realize you are alone. The life of a pharaoh is a life lived in a crowd. From the moment he wakes until the moment he sleeps, he is surrounded by people. He is surrounded by the priests in the temple, by the courtiers in the audience hall, by the guards in the corridors, by the women in the harem, by the servants who attend to his every need. He is never, ever physically alone. And yet he is the loneliest man in the world. There must come a moment, a quiet and a terrifying and a lucid moment, when this realization descends upon him with the weight of a granite block. It might happen in the middle of a great festival. He is being carried on a golden litter through the streets of Thebes. The crowds are 10 deep, a sea of faces, all turned towards him. They are cheering, they are shouting his name, they are throwing flowers in his path, they are worshiping him. He is the focus of 1,000,000 adoring eyes. And in that moment, as he looks out over this sea of humanity, he realizes that not a single one of them sees him. They do not see the man, the person, with his own fears, his own doubts, his own small and secret and human heart. They see only the crown, the golden mask, the divine symbol. They are cheering for an idea, for an office, for a god. And the man inside the symbol is completely and utterly invisible, and completely and utterly alone.
Or the moment might come in the quiet of his own private chambers. A great victory has been won. A new and a magnificent temple has been completed. The kingdom is at peace. The granaries are full. It is a moment of supreme triumph. And yet, he feels nothing. There is no one he can turn to and share a moment of genuine, unguarded joy. His wife is his sister, their relationship a matter of dynastic and of a religious and of a political duty. His children are his potential rivals, pieces in the great and the cold game of succession. His advisors are his sycophants, their praise a calculated performance. He has all the power in the world. He has all the wealth in the world. He has all the glory in the world. And he has no one to share a simple and an honest and a human moment with. The gold, the armies, the temples, none of it can love him, not as a person, only as a pharaoh. This is the ultimate and the most profound and the most tragic paradox of his existence. He is the center of the universe, and he is a man without a true human center. He is the father of his people, and he is a man without a family, in the truest sense of the word. The loneliness of the Pharaoh is a loneliness that is as vast and as silent
and as empty as the great desert that surrounds his kingdom. It is the shadow that the great and the golden and the divine crown casts on the human soul, and it is a shadow from which there is no escape. The procession for the living God. There are times when the Pharaoh must leave the cloistered and the silent and the shadowy world of the palace and present himself to his people. These are the great public festivals, the processions that mark a major religious holiday or a great military victory. And on these days, the silent and the isolated and the lonely figure of the king is transformed into the magnificent and the adored and the all-powerful public icon of the living God. Let us stand in the crowd on the great processional way that connects the temple of Karnak with the temple of Luxor. The sun is a hot and a white and a brazen disk in the sky. The air is thick with the dust kicked up by 1,000 shuffling feet, and with the scent of flowers, of sweat, and of a deep and a collective and a joyful anticipation. The crowd has been waiting for hours. They are a sea of white linen, of brown faces, of dark eyes, all turned in one direction, waiting. And then, in the distance, they hear it, the sound of drums, a slow and a steady and a powerful and a rhythmic heartbeat, the sound of trumpets, a high and a clear and a brazen fanfare. The procession is coming.
First come the priests, their heads shaved, their white linen robes immaculate, chanting the ancient hymns. They are followed by soldiers from the elite palace guard, their painted shields and their bronze spear tips a glittering and a formidable and a disciplined river of metal in the sun. And then, carried on the shoulders of a dozen powerful bearers, comes the divine bark. It is a ceremonial boat, its hull covered in gold, its prow and stern decorated with the head of the god. And resting within this golden ship, on a high throne, beneath a rich canopy to shade him from the sun, is the Pharaoh. As he comes into view, a great and a single and a thunderous roar erupts from the crowd. It is a sound of pure and of an unadulterated and of a deeply emotional adoration. The people fall to their knees. They bow their heads. They do not dare to look directly at the blinding and the divine radiance of their king. The Pharaoh himself is a perfect and a still and a silent and an impassive figure. He is dressed in his most magnificent regalia. His golden collar glitters in the sun. The double crown of the two lands sits upon his head. His face is a serene and an unreadable and a godlike mask.
He does not smile. He does not wave in the modern sense. He might make a slow and a formal and a ritualized gesture of blessing. He is an actor in a great and a sacred and a very ancient play, and he is playing the part of a god. He is floating above his people, a distant and a shimmering and an almost unreal figure. The faces in the crowd blur into a single and an anonymous and an adoring mass. He can hear their cheers. He can feel the wave of their devotion. But he is not a part of it. He is the object of it. The procession moves with a slow and a majestic and a deeply hypnotic pace. It is a piece of living theater designed to awe, to inspire, and to reinforce the unbridgeable gap between the mortal and the divine. For the people in the crowd, this is a moment of profound and of a joyful and of a spiritual connection to their king, to their gods, to the very idea of Egypt. For the man at the center of it all, it is perhaps the moment of his most complete and his most profound and his most absolute isolation.
The poisoned cup that wasn't. In the life of a pharaoh, fear is a constant and a quiet and a deeply intimate companion. It is the fear of a bad harvest, the fear of a foreign invasion, the fear of the god's displeasure. But the most personal and the most persistent of all fears is the fear of betrayal, the fear of the assassin's knife, or of the poisoner's cup. Let us imagine a scene, not of a real assassination, but of the fear of one, a moment that reveals the fragile and the paranoid and the hair-trigger reality of court life. A formal reception is being held in the palace. The pharaoh is seated on his throne. A high-ranking envoy from a foreign power has just presented his credentials. As a gesture of honor and of goodwill, a cup of the finest wine is to be shared. A servant, a young and a nervous cupbearer, approaches the throne. He is carrying a single and a beautiful and a golden goblet of wine. He has been a servant in the palace for his entire life. His loyalty is in theory unquestionable.
He walks with a slow and a careful and a ritualized grace. He kneels before the throne. He presents the cup to the royal taster. The taster takes a sip. He waits. He nods. The wine is safe. The cupbearer then rises, and he takes the final few steps to the pharaoh's throne. His hands are trembling slightly from the weight of the moment, from the terror of being in the direct presence of the living God. And then it happens. His foot catches on a small and an unseen imperfection in the polished stone floor. He stumbles. For a single and a terrible and a heart-stopping moment, the entire court freezes. The music stops. The conversations die. Every eye in the hall is fixed on the young man and the golden cup. The cup flies from his hands. The dark red wine arcs through the air, and it lands with a great and a shocking and a dramatic splash on the pristine white linen of the pharaoh's kilt. A collective gasp of horror goes through the hall. The servant has not just been clumsy. He has committed an act of sacrilege. He has defiled the sacred person of the king.
But in the minds of many, a darker suspicion immediately takes hold. Was it an accident, or was it a signal? Was the wine not wine at all, but a fast-acting acid meant to burn and to disfigure? Was this a failed assassination attempt? The young servant is on the floor, prostrate, his body trembling with a fear that is beyond all comprehension. He knows that his life is over. The palace guards surge forward, their hands on their swords, their faces grim. But the pharaoh does not move. He does not flinch. He sits on his throne, a perfect and an unmoving and an impassive statue of divine calm. He looks down at the great red stain that is spreading across his white robes, a stain that looks, for all the world, like a terrible and a mortal wound. He does not know in this moment whether it was an accident or an attack. All he knows is that he must perform the part of a god, a being who is above fear, above danger, above the messy and the clumsy and the treacherous world of mortals. He raises a single hand. He speaks a single quiet word, and in that moment, the fate of the young servant and the mood of the entire court is decided. This is the reality of his power, and this is the reality of his fear. A single spilled cup of wine is enough to bring the entire and the glittering and the deadly world of the court to a complete and a terrifying and a silent halt.
The sand burial of an enemy.
Justice in the kingdom of the Pharaoh is swift, and it is absolute, and it is theatrical. For a common criminal, the punishment might be a flogging or forced labor in the mines. But for an enemy of the state, for a traitor, for a man who has dared to conspire against the living God, the punishment is designed not just to end a life, but to erase an existence both in this world and in the next. Let us imagine the scene. A high-ranking nobleman, a cousin of the Pharaoh, has been found guilty of treason. He was a part of a conspiracy, a plot to seize the throne. The plot has failed, and now the price must be paid. The execution does not take place in the city. It takes place in the desert, a place of desolation, of chaos, of the forces that lie outside the ordered world of Egypt. The condemned man is brought to a pre-dug pit in the sand, under the brutal and the white and the unforgiving glare of the sun. He is not given the honor of a quick, clean death by beheading. His end is to be a burial in the sand. This is a punishment of a unique and a terrible and a deeply symbolic horror.
The ancient Egyptian belief is that for a person to achieve a blessed afterlife, their body must be preserved through the sacred rites of mummification. Their name must be remembered, spoken, and written. Their tomb must be a safe and a permanent and an eternal home for their spirit. The sand burial is a deliberate and a systematic and a brutal negation of all of these things. The man is forced into the pit, and the soldiers begin to shovel the hot and the dry and the heavy sand on top of him. It is a slow and a terrifying and a suffocating end. But the physical death is only the beginning of the punishment. His body, buried in the damp sand, will not be preserved. It will rot. It will decay. His spirit, his ka, will have no physical form to return to. It will be left to wander, a hungry and a restless and a tormented ghost. And then comes the final and the most terrible act of destruction. The Pharaoh orders a damnatio memoriae, a damnation of memory. The traitor's name is to be hacked out from every monument, from every temple wall, from every public record where it has been inscribed. His statues are to be overthrown, their faces smashed.
It is an attempt to erase a man from history itself. It is to declare that he never existed. For in the Egyptian mind, to be without a name is to be truly and eternally annihilated. The Pharaoh stands, and he watches this grim and this necessary and this terrible act of justice. He is the guardian of Maat, of the divine order, and this man has tried to destroy that order. The punishment must be absolute. But as he watches the sand swallow his rival, as he gives the order to erase his name from the stone, a cold and a quiet and a deeply unsettling thought might enter his mind. The wheel of fate, the shy, is a mysterious thing. The man who is a traitor today was a trusted cousin yesterday. The power of the Pharaoh is absolute, but it is not eternal. The dynasty is a long and a bloody and a treacherous story. And he must wonder, as he stands there under the hot desert sun, who will one day stand over him? Who will be the one to judge his own life, his own reign? And will his own name be remembered with honor, or will it too one day be hacked from the stone and given over to the silent and the hungry and the all-consuming sand?
The Last Chamber. The life of a pharaoh is a long and a complex and a public performance. but it is a performance that has been, from its very first day, directed towards a single and a final and a deeply private last act. This is the act of death and the journey into the eternal afterlife. The tomb, which has been under construction for his entire reign, is finally complete. Let us imagine the Pharaoh, now old, his body weary, his long reign drawing to a close. He makes one final journey to his house of eternity in the Valley of the Kings. He walks through the long and the sloping and the silent corridors, the same corridors he has walked many times before. But today the air is different. It is not the air of a construction site. It is the air of a finished and a waiting and a perfect silence. The workmen are gone. The artists have packed away their brushes. The last of the stone dust has been swept away. He stands in the final and the great burial chamber. The massive and the granite sarcophagus is in place. The walls around him are a complete and a vibrant and a breathtaking universe of images and of texts.
The artists have finished their work. The paintings are a perfect and a magical map of the world to come. Here are the gods who will greet him, the demons he must overcome, the sacred boats that will carry his soul through the heavens. The ceiling above him is a deep and a celestial blue, covered in a spray of golden five-pointed stars. He is standing in the middle of a sacred machine, a machine that has been designed with an immense and a meticulous and a deeply learned skill to do one thing, to ensure his successful rebirth as a god. He runs his hand over the cool and the smooth and the painted surface of the wall. He can feel the faint and the shallow relief of the carved hieroglyphs. These are the spells, the words of power that he will need to speak on his journey.
This chamber is the most personal and the most secret and the most important space in his entire universe. It is a room that no other living human being, after his burial, will ever be meant to see. It is a place of profound and of a paradoxical emotion. It is a tomb, a place of death, but it is also a womb, a place of rebirth. It is the end of his earthly life, and it is the beginning of his eternal one. He has spent a lifetime and a kingdom's fortune preparing for this journey, and now the vessel is ready. The maps are drawn, the spells are written. He stands in the deep and the resonant and the absolute silence of his own finished tomb. He is surrounded by the story of his life and by the promise of his death. There is no fear. There is only a quiet and a solemn and a profound sense of completion. The long and the public and the wearying performance is almost over. The final and the secret and the eternal part of his story is about to begin.
The crown that outlives you. And so the end comes. The long and the ritualized and the deeply human life of the Pharaoh reaches its conclusion. The divine vessel is empty. The living Horus has flown back to the horizon to join his father, Ra, in his eternal journey across the sky. But the death of the man is not the death of the institution. The kingdom of Egypt is built on the principle of continuity, of an endless and an unbroken and a divine cycle. The king is dead. Long live the king! The funeral is the greatest and the most elaborate and the most expensive ceremony of all. the body is taken by the embalmers, and over 70 days it is transformed through the sacred and the secret and the ancient arts of mummification into an eternal and a divine and an incorruptible vessel. The funeral procession is a vast and a solemn and a spectacular piece of public theater. The mummy is placed in its series of gilded coffins, and it is carried across the Nile to its final and its secret and its silent home in the Valley of the Kings.
The tomb is filled with all the things that the pharaoh's spirit will need in the afterlife: furniture, food, wine, clothes, weapons, chariots, and the small and the silent and the magical servant statues, the Shaptis, who will perform his labor for him for all eternity. And then the great stone door of the tomb is sealed. The entrance is covered over with rocks and with sand, and the location of the eternal house is, in theory, forgotten, a secret to be guarded for all time. And back in the palace, in the world of the living, a new Horus has taken the throne. The son, the heir, has put on the double crown. He has taken the crook and the flail into his hands, and the great and the slow and the demanding and the eternal cycle begins again. The man who was the Pharaoh is now just a memory. His name is carved on the temple walls. His statues stand with their serene and their colossal and their inhuman gaze, watching over the land. He has become a part of the great and the silent and the stone landscape of history.
The person is gone. The individual, with his own private fears and his own small joys and his own profound and his own crushing loneliness, has been completely and utterly subsumed by the office. The crown outlives the head that wears it. The throne outlives the body that sits upon it. The great and the beautiful and the deeply burdensome idea of the Pharaoh endures. And we are left thousands of years later to piece together the story of the human being who was hidden beneath the golden mask. We are left to listen for the faint and the ghostly and the human echo in the vast and the silent and the sun-baked stone holes of a civilization that believed with all its heart in the power of forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey down the Nile. May your own rest now be deep and peaceful and profound.